Yeah, we'll do a review series today on salary negotiation. And yeah, it is going to be an open format. There are like no presentation, so I'll just like run by some stuff. And then yeah, Cecilia will talk about a few tips and tricks based on her experience. And then yeah, if anybody is from the audience, we would love to do like a mock interview. So I can be the HR and one of you, yeah, can be that candidate. Otherwise, yeah, we'll pick somebody amongst us. Okay, so I've written like a two-part blog post. So this is the link I'll post so that you have all the resources. And once the recording is there, we'll post it on Slack and on our social media. So yeah. Why this topic? So this topic, last year I was searching for a job, and then one of the things that I realized was, or as I was learning about this topic, I just realized that salary negotiation just have to be like one of the primary topics that also has to be one of the core topic for your interview preparation. And that's where I wrote my experience here. So all of the links I shared here along with additional resources. Yeah, so based on my experience, so when I first relocated to Berlin from India, I did not know how to negotiate, and I ended up getting paid less, and that went up to like about 3 years. Because once you're in there, it's very difficult to change your base salary unless you get a promotion, etc. Yeah, that's what happened. And then last year when I was searching for a job, I really wanted to be sure that I kind of do all the homework necessary. So kind of like read a lot of stuff about what can be like a good salary negotiation sort of thing. And I was really amazed that yeah, this is what I posted, that I never considered until then that this has to be like one of the core topic. And this is where I've been like talking to a few people yeah, through the community or via Twitter, and that's where we are because why this event. Yeah, some other things are, or other things, if you want to understand the job market and salary ranges, I use levels.fyi, which is kind of like a good resource. And then this article, there is another article. So the second article in this link has strong focus on IT salaries for Germany. But yeah, US folks, maybe you have certain resources, what you all refer, but levels.fyi is kind of global. I guess Glassdoor is sort of outdated. I'm not sure if it still has the right salary. So maybe you might want to switch to levels.fyi. And then there is this another resource, which is sort of like, currently it's only for Europe. So there is something called techpace.com. Yeah, so if you're in Europe, this has very good data for Germany, Netherlands, etc. That's step one. So for you to understand where you are today and how much you want to claim, because you do not want to get like a rough estimate, right? And that's the first part in doing the homework. So I get the data, identify the current job market and salary range for the role and the level that you're targeting. There is also a Slack community called Ladies Get Paid. So I joined this like 2 years ago, but there was like a lot of useful information there. I'm no longer an active member in that Slack community, but yeah, this is like something I know of. If you all know of any other Slack communities which particularly talk about salary negotiations, please share. And as I was also like learning about this topic, I also found some other resources. So one is fearless-salarynegotiation.com. And then there is another link here. So most of the advice are sort of like I did the homework by reading a lot of content on the internet. And then once you kind of like understand, get your basics correct. So that's, you have your homework done, you understand what the job market is, how much you should claim. The next thing to know is what to negotiate, because most of the companies, there is something like a base salary, and then you get like a lot of bonuses. So also knowing what to negotiate is also like equally important. because signing bonus is something at many companies, salary has little wiggle room, and equity and signing bonus is what like you can negotiate. And then you can also negotiate about how much, which part of the career you are, right? So for like for beginners or like some mid-level, it's very important that you also get very good support to learn. So there should be like very good learning budget. There should be like very good mentorship, because this is where this is what will determine the next years in your career. And it's very important that you get the base right. It's like the foundation for the house. So it's also important not just to focus on the base salary, but also like, what are the various factors that you can negotiate. I think in this current pandemic world, it's also about being able to negotiate maybe for remote work, and also like, how to still be top of the market, etc. So those are also like, there are various other factors to know what to negotiate. And then yeah, this is like my primary focus on your learning curve. So along with your compensation package, ask if the company has a learning budget and how do you get to use it. Yeah, if you have any paid coaching or workshops, because this is like very important. And if you're, like I already mentioned, if you're beginners or mid-level, it's very important that you get sort of like very good mentorship at your workplace. Yeah, so the next one is so that was what I did like part one. So just to understand, do your homework, all that stuff. The next part is salary negotiation tips itself for software engineers. So 3 mistakes, there might be more, but some what I summarized in my blog post is: do not specify a salary range. If you read a lot of content, these will tell, do not specify a salary range, because let's say like, an example is 50 to 55K. These are the typical ranges for beginner level in Germany. So I guess this might be less for a US standard, but yeah, this is where the numbers are. So let's say like, let's say if you tell 50 to 55K, right? Now the recruiter, what they often do is they want to close the deal at the bottom of the salary range. You always want to get paid at the top end of the salary range. So do not specify a salary range, but instead, if at all, if you've done your homework correctly, and if all the data says 55 is what is a good on the higher end, specify 55. Because when you say 50 to 55, you always like will be lowball either to 50, or if at all you realize 50 is too less, and then after negotiation you might come close to 52 or 52.5. So you will never get 55 because you have specified a range. So rather, even if you're targeting for 55, if you're fine, ask for 58 or ask for 60. If the data says 60 is on the very much on the higher end, ask for like, for 58 or 55. So that's always give like a whole number. So specify a number that corresponds to the higher end of your desired salary range. Now, when the given position is competitive, specifying a higher number which does not correspond to the job's salary range might sort of disqualify you from further interview rounds. But this is also like, which is where it helps like to talk to people, to like, to sort of understand, get the data. And then so I'm a hiring manager. So currently I'm an engineering manager at Anaconda, and in the past I've also like I have closed deals with candidates. So in my hiring experience, usually what happens is we have a fixed budget and defined salary pay bands for different levels. So now I like it when candidates like, give me an initial number upfront. And this is why most most recruiters during your first introduction call, they ask you for a range because they want to know if it will fit within their budget. And now, if at all, when the question is asked for you, if you have good data, then specify like a number, not a range. But if you're not sure, so politely you can ask for the salary range from the company. Most of the recruiters or hiring managers would be like very much willing to specify this, because like I said, most of the roles will have a fixed budget. So they will be always happy like, to tell you like a budget. And then during the interviewing process itself, this is what will determine like, on which band of the salary that you will fit in. So if you like, if you perform exceptionally well, then everybody from the tech panel, from the interviewing panel will be very much convinced to give you like a salary that is maybe towards the mid-level or a little higher over the mid-level. So this is how like the final salary gets fixed. But one tip to get your negotiation during the last call, right, is do not specify a range. If you want, you can give like a number, which is always make sure it's on the higher end. And then sometimes, yeah, recruiters will tell you maybe no, that doesn't fit within your budget. And then you can tell, okay, like, I'm open for negotiation, or ask for the salary range from the company. And then during the interviewing rounds itself, you would have a lot of time to like, to do your math, to do your homework, figure out from maybe from the community, from maybe other people working at the same company or similar company, similar roles. And then when the final stage comes, you can like, better be prepared about when the offer comes to you. So this is like tip number one. And then these days, I've also found a lot of job ads also like place salaries in their job advertisements itself, which is kind of very nice. But yeah, not everybody does it. So it's always good to look for, to get sources from levels.fyi, or yeah, like said in the chat, payscale.com, etc. And yeah, Indeed salaries also, yeah. All right. So, okay. So here's a question: what happens when your recruiter doesn't give a range? Yeah, that's a good question. So this is like, you can do two things now. When your recruiter doesn't give a range, you can just tell them the higher number that if you have in mind. But if you're still not comfortable, or if you just want to wait, you can politely say that you are open for negotiation, or you're very much interested in continuing the interviewing process, and you would like to revisit this question when the offer is in its final stage. So this is always like a good answer to tell if you're still interested with the position, and then that will still save you a lot of room during negotiation. And also the other downside by specifying a range is 50 to 55. Unless you get like good hiring managers or good recruiters who let's say like 50 to 55 is definitely low balling on your side. If there are like good people, and there are, so they will, if the salary range for that role, if the panel is very much convinced, okay, this role for at this level, this is like 55, if it's like very much on the lower end, and if there are good people, they will tell you like, okay, this is the salary for level 3, and we will we will give you the salary at that level. People do that. But sometimes people also want to close deals, and if they see that the candidate itself is not advocating for themselves, then they would either stick to 50 to 55. It could be that 55 is too much on the is very much lower on the lower side, but the actual range itself starts from, let's say, like 70 or 75. They would still be happy to give you at 55, because you advocated for 55, which is still on the higher side. They would just close the deal. So this is what happens. And so be mindful of when asked about this question, what's like a salary that you're expecting.
There's also another question I'd like to answer from Kelly around, my company is moving from full-time remote back to a hybrid model. Can I ask for more money based on the remote benefit being taken away? So you don't have to get permission to ask for money. You can always ask, right? Like there's not a rule against asking. Anytime the conditions of your job changes, whether that be you're taking on more work, you've been added to a project that was outside of the previous scope of your responsibilities, if somebody else in the team has left and you're now responsible for their workload, anytime that your job changes, then that gives you an opportunity to renegotiate or to ask for more money. So like there's not really like a rule around that you can't ask for more money. So if you see anything that's changing, if you feel like you're going to be losing value or spending more money to continue or providing more value for the company than you were before, then you should absolutely kind of take a look at that opportunity. And there's a lot of jobs out there now that are fully remote. And if it's something where the company doesn't understand that difference, then you can explore other options. But yeah, there's no you can always ask. Yeah, that's something that that it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around, because you don't want to be polite or come off as being like presumptuous or greedy, but you can always ask whenever the conditions of your job changes. So
Yes, good question. And yeah, thanks, Cecilia, for covering that. And also for remote, yeah, I just found this article. So I guess this was just like written this week, how to maximize your job offer for remote engineers. Like I said, knowing what to negotiate, especially for remote candidates, I think there should be like enough room to also negotiate for like for home office setup, home office budget, those kind of things. Yeah, which may not be like too much, but it's also like still worth asking, because yeah, it's internet, all your setup, and plus like the extra stuff that you were once getting in the office, because it's still like win-win for the companies. If they switch remote, they'll be still like saving lots of cost. Yeah, those are also like good to know that there is always room to negotiate on all those things. For example, most of companies themselves would have a lot of home working budget, but it's also like always good to ask, so that you don't end up spending things out of your pocket, and it's a sort of like covered. So it's also like good to negotiate on that upfront. The next thing is, do not assume that your employer will notice your hard work and offer a salary raise. I guess this I can say that this was true from my side, because like I said, when I relocated to Berlin, I kind of, yeah, I knew it was lowballed on this side, but I was quite confident that yeah, I would work hard, and then like they would notice my work, and I would get paid more. So this do not assume, because like I said earlier, there is always like fixed budget for like for employees when they are hired, and then companies, big or small, at least they will have some sort of a review process, and this won't happen out of the box unless like exceptional, like this can happen. I'm not saying this will never happen, but most likely this will not happen. And because the salaries are fixed, the bands are fixed, if at all you've been lowballed, do not assume your employer will come to you and tell, hey, you know what, you've been working too hard, so here's your salary raise. That will never happen. So which is why it's very important for you to get this negotiation or the salary deal right. If it's like a sales deal, right? So if it's you are like you're negotiating for yourself, and you should always be comfortable advocating for yourself. And this is where employers would be like, yeah, they're just like closing the deal. Yeah, so that's what I said. So do not assume your employer will notice your hard work, and yeah, this is like very important to understand this one. Do not prepare at the last minute. So also, like interviews are best performed when you're not under stress. I always like whoever I talk about career advice, or just like doing mock interviews, etc., I tell them this: interviews are best performed when you're not under stress. And this might seem easy to be told rather than actually do it. One of the advice that I give folks is to like to give interviews or to prepare interviews when you're not looking for a job, because you're not stressed at this point. It kind of like gives you an idea about what the job market is, what is required, what is the tech skills required, or like how you stand, how you stand yourself in clearing the interview rounds itself. And because you're not stressed, because you're not actually looking for a job, you get a lot of data by talking to people. uh, this may not be like wasting somebody else's time, because in the end, if at all you really like, then yeah, you might end up getting the job. So it always never hurts anybody to like to prepare interviews or to give interviews when you're actually not looking for a job. And then yeah, something that I realized last year when I was looking for my next job was salary negotiation. Or this topic should be like one of a topic in your interview preparation checklist. And also like maybe talk to somebody if you can do mock interviews if you're not comfortable, etc. So this is also like this will help you a lot. uh, Tips for negotiating a better salary. have goals and data to back your negotiation offer. So like I said, look for like resources on the internet. So some of those I've shared here, levels.fyi, TechPace, and yeah, payscale.com, Glassdoor, Indeed. Yes, they have. Glassdoor, I'm not sure. It may not be updated. So which is why I would kind of advocate for levels.fyi. I don't have any connection, but yeah, it's the data seems to be accurate there. That's why. And then yeah, take it in writing. So at least in Germany we have this norm about having everything in writing. So although like you get calls, this might be culturally different across regions, but whatever you have, take it in writing, because people get replaced all the time. So let's say like at the time your hiring manager did promise you something, your hiring manager, he or she, or the recruiter, he or she might have told, hey, you know what, this is good. We can, at this point, we cannot offer you this much, but maybe 6 months later, we will give you a better thing. So please take this in writing, because people get replaced all the time. This recruiter or this hiring manager might change over time. And then, yeah, as long as it is there in writing, you can always use that as a proof to like, maybe after 6 months, etc., whatever was the agreement. So have that in writing. And the final thing is, there is nothing to lose when you negotiate. So let's say like, the salary offer comes to you only at the final stage, right? So at this stage, the company, the interviewing panel itself would have invested certain number of hours in you. And because they are interested, they would come to you with this offer. So now at this point, you coming back with a counter offer, or you just telling, oh, you know what, I was wondering, maybe there would be some room for negotiation. I did my math. I like, I referred certain sources, and based on that, I feel 55 might be too less. I was wondering if there is room for negotiation. I was wondering I could get up to 60. This always has to like, be backed with your data. So if 58 you feel, so ask for 58. At this point, there is nothing to lose when you negotiate. So no employer will revoke the offer just because you asked for more money. They will just tell it's a binary yes or a no. Most of the cases, if they really like you, they because also they have invested certain number of hours in you, they want like really close the deal, and they would always come back to you. Okay, you know what, let me check back, and let me check and get back to you. And there is always this sort of thing works. So I can confirm that as underrepresented or as somebody like minorities and tech, we may not be as comfortable to talk this openly. This is why talking with communities or just practicing these kind of things upfront really helps you, because in the end, it's just about being brave, or at least this is what I did. There is nothing to lose when you negotiate, and you can always politely, even like, even if the offer is really like, on the higher end, you can still ask for an extra 2,000, for extra 3,000, etc. Because there is, you won't lose anything at this point. You will just get like a yes or a no. If it's yes, it's still on your side. If it's no, then maybe you can tell, okay, so I was wondering, what are the other options for negotiation? What is the learning budget? What is the work from home budget? What is etc. etc. So also like know in advance what to negotiate. And these days, there is also the part of equity for software engineers, or equity in jobs. I am not like someone who, because I'm still figuring out this topic for myself. I've just added a link here. So if you're interested, please click this link. So the author of this, Gergely, is quite experienced in this, and he writes a lot of articles around equity and investments, etc. So yeah, take a look on that one. And equity or sign-on bonus are also something that you can always negotiate for. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share. And then yeah, let's see if we have, I'll stop sharing my screen. Let's see if we have questions. Yes. Is there a question?
Yeah, I can answer. There's a question
Okay.
from Kelly asking, basically, recently found out that a male coworker, same job title, start at the same time, makes 30% more. you know, there's a location difference, West Coast, East Coast, but, you know, obviously that probably does not account for that much of a difference. Like, should I bring this up during my negotiation? So I think when the research that I've seen and the things that I've seen work well, whenever you find out that there is a pay disparity, is to, instead of, you know, focusing on a conversation around this person's making this much, I should be making this much, it should be more around the value that you bring and knowing what you're worth. So typically the language that I'll see around that is something along the lines of, you know, based on a review of the market value for the position that I'm in, and given my performance in this job and knowing that I'm able to add value to this company, a salary more along the lines of this would make sense. And I would like to negotiate to see how close we can get to that salary. So it's kind of like a good first approach is now you can say, okay, I've done my research and I know that the value of this position is this much. You may not want to call out anything specific because you don't know about, like, obviously, like we all know what's going on, but they could come back and say something like, oh, they had this much experience, they had much this, or maybe they got a different benefit or something like that. So you don't know individual circumstances, so it's best to keep things general. But now you know that that is what the position is worth, and you should, you know, use that and leverage that. And essentially, there's an article that I can share about around like kind of the strategy for what to do when kind of negotiating these specific situations. So I'll pop that in the chat here. But yeah, so you want to keep it around like what your value is. You want to keep it around what the value of that position is in general, and then use that as leverage to renegotiate. It's as an initial start, you know, and kind of see how that goes. So.
Cool, thank you. And Cecilia, yeah, you wanted to talk about the report?
Yes. Okay. So I want to share a resource here. The first thing I want to do actually is I just want to tack on to the end of the presentation around like negotiating can't hurt you. So there are some research out there and some articles out there around how when women act off stereotype in negotiations or in meetings, that they can be like, you know, judged inappropriately or discriminated against. And there's some articles around there around like how to negotiate as a woman. And it's like, don't be defensive, like be deferential, like don't act off stereotype. I would argue that, you know, a company that would treat you that way, or a company that would discriminate that way, you don't necessarily want to change how you are to fit into a company if it's not going to be the culture that you want. Because if you change who you are to get to the negotiation, then you're going to have to work there. and so just kind of keep that in mind. So the only thing that I've seen is if you're negotiating with a recruiter and you get the sense that they may be like that, and you're never going to work with that recruiter again once you get the job, and the culture of the actual company itself is great, then you may want to follow some of those strategies. But otherwise, I would say, you know, a negotiation is also a way to see how that company is going to work with you in the future, because the initial negotiation is going to be similar to how you negotiate anything at that company, whether it be your salary, whether it be what kind of work you take on, like who's going to be on your team, anytime you run into an issue. So it's a good way to feel out how they handle these types of situations too, from a perspective of how you evaluate the company. So but so one of the things that I wanted to share is there's a report from this site called Alpha. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So hopefully you can see it says Alpha Black women have the lowest rate of negotiating their offer.
Yes.
Is that okay? Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat as well. So this is a report, and it's essentially the state of pay for women 2022. There's a lot of information in here, but I wanted to call out specifically some stats around negotiating. So Black women have the lowest rate of negotiating their offer. So only 32% of Black women said that they didn't negotiate at all because they felt like it wouldn't change anything and it wouldn't help anything. And so you can see that the kind of across these different demographics, you know, Black women, Latino women have, or like Latinx, have a lower rate of actually going forward and negotiating their salaries. But negotiating your salary is really important, and that's because of this next slide here. So negotiation did not achieve equity, so Black and Latino women by negotiating didn't necessarily get to the same level as their counterparts, but they still did have an increase. So if you don't negotiate, then not only are you not going to make as much as your counterparts, but you may not even hit like a percentage of what they would have hit. So when Black women did not negotiate, they received, when they did negotiate, they received the average salary at the level of Asian respondents who did not negotiate. And same thing for Latino women. When they did negotiate, it was up to the base salary of white women who did not negotiate. So if you are a woman of color specifically, it's really critical that you do negotiate, even because otherwise you're going to be at a
recording in progress.
Oh, sorry. Okay. And so I wanted to share that report. And then this Alpha site also has a salary database. So you do have to submit your salary to see more salaries, but it breaks it down by years of experience, demographic, the job function, the job title, and then their base annual salary. And they have more than 7,000 salaries submitted in the database. So that can be a good resource as well. And I also wanted to share that there are industry or subcategory specific reports that can also have salary information. So for example, developerrelations.com, they produce a state of developer relations report every year that has salary information. So if you work in a specific subset of technology, if you're in QA, if you're in developer relations, if you're in backend, front end, like specific, you work with specific technology, then you may also be able to find like reports that are more specific to that area to help you zero in on what salaries are, not just in general, but for that specific job title. This report is really interesting, and I think gives you that kind of insight into what you should be asking for. Another thing to keep in mind is that with COVID and a lot of people going remote, the geographic aspect of it has changed a lot. So it used to be very location specific. If you lived in the Midwest or, versus a West Coast and Bay Area versus somewhere else, you may see very, very different salary ranges. If you're working for a remote company, that's changed a lot. So it's important to kind of look at more recent salaries and maybe look at a mix of different regions to try and get a good average. And so a couple of other things I wanted to note, just based on my experience. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're negotiating your salary, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, is the concept of risk. If you are taking on a position that has any element of risk, then you will want to leverage that in your negotiations when talking around your compensation. When I say risk, I mean the size of the company. So I've worked at startups before. So when you're working at a startup, there's an inherent level of risk, which is why you typically tend to get either a higher salary or more equity in the company. Risk can also be if you are the first person in on a team or a new function and the role is not well defined. Your job role may change, your job duties may change, the type of projects that you work on may change. That's something that you can bring to the negotiation and say, look, I understand that typically a front-end engineer at my level would be making this much. However, this is a brand new product line, it's a brand new project, and we're going to be building out a team. So given that, I probably will have to take on additional responsibilities in order to help make that happen. I think that this salary is more in line with this position. So anytime that you're kind of working with any type of ambiguity, you want to factor that into how much you should be making for your compensation, because you could have the same job at a different company without the risk. You essentially want to make sure that you're being compensated for any type of risk that's taking place. The other thing to keep in mind is if you are concerned that your existing title and existing salary will prevent you from being able to negotiate, keep everything focused on the skill set and value and the new role. So I have moved from junior software to like a success engineer to technical account manager to community lead. And a lot of those types of things would be like, well, if you haven't done this before, your title was this. And so, we can't really bring you in at the same level. And I always kept it focused on what will I be doing, the job responsibilities of the new job, the skills that I bring, regardless of what my title are. And I almost never say what my salary was at the previous job. And if they try to ask, I say, like every job is different. This company is obviously very different than my last company. The responsibilities I'm going to be taking on are very different from my last company. So I don't feel that my current compensation is relevant to the responsibilities I'll be taking on here. And I'd like to focus on the value that I'm going to bring to your organization. And given that, this compensation is in line with my expectations. So, so you can, you don't have to answer certain questions. You can keep things focused in the future and focus on the value that you're going to bring. And then when it comes to equity, definitely do your homework. That was something that I did not necessarily understand very much. I kind of just thought of it as like a bonus on top of like a kind of like a lottery ticket, and kind of wasn't thinking about it too much. But it is important, especially like I said, if you are working at a company and you think about how that affects your overall compensation package. The important thing to keep in mind with equity is whether or not you will actually be able to use it. So if you work for a big company and you're actually granted shares of stock and you can sell those, that's very different than getting stock options for a company that's not publicly traded, where you have to wait for a liquidity event like an acquisition or an IPO to even be able to sell those shares. So those are some things to keep in mind is, will you even be able to access the value of that equity? When would you be able to access that value? And take that into consideration with your overall package. So yeah, so hopefully that information is helpful for you. I see a lot of questions in the chat, so maybe we could, if you see some of those there.
Yes, so I answered Amanda's question via chat. Yeah, Amanda, if you have any question or if something is unanswered, feel free to ask. Yeah, at your current job, it might be a little tricky unless, yeah, the performance reviews happen in a duly manner, etc., etc. Because let's say like you've been underpaid and then you're due for a promotion, there might still not be much of a room because it might still be within 10%. So you can't expect like maybe between 20 or 30%. That's because of the pay band, and employers want to be fair to all the employees. And yeah, it's the question won't come if one person is underpaid, and this is why, unless the manager knows how to justify in front of the review committee, etc. So there are like a lot of things that go. So I think one good thing to do in your current job is to understand how performance reviews itself happen at your current place. And then, yeah, you have like a lot of data, a lot of insights, and be better prepared for that negotiation talk with your manager. So that might be like sort of helpful.
Yeah. And at some companies, it may be easier to get a raise if you are able to step into a new job title. So they may not have like, they may only have a certain, like, we can only give you 5% a year as an increase or whatever it may be. But if there's a different role and that has a budget for hiring, and it's and you're able to maybe like get a promotion into or step into that role, then you may actually be able to get a higher salary because of that. So that's something where I've done that before, where they wanted to give me a raise, but there was only a certain amount of wiggle room for the role that I was in currently, but I was doing more than the job that I was doing. And so instead they transitioned me to a different role in order to be able to give me like a higher salary than they would have been. So that's if you have a good manager and you're able to talk through some of those options, and you can look at existing job postings and see what some of the salary ranges are, that might be an option for you as well.
Yes, and then there is another question: how often should you ask for a raise at your current company? There needs to be a company culture where at least once a year, performance reviews need to be done. It has to be visited because the tech market especially is growing. And sometimes it also depends with employers itself. If they come from non-traditional tech background, so they may not be aware of this and sort of like, yeah, have different views. But in tech, it's very important. Twice a year reviews are kind of common these days. It's mostly like reviews, like, to gather feedback, collect data points, sort of like 360 feedback where not only your manager, but also peers sort of give reviews. So this is sort of like becoming a culture. But again, this really depends with the employer, depends with the region. It might be also tied to the region. But at least minimum once a year, I think this should be revisited because tech salaries like kind of change crazily. So it's very important that company needs to be aware that they need to pay employees well. So this So if this culture is not happening, maybe it's worth like, push the right people at your current company to sort of like bring this culture, and so that you don't have to ask for a raise, but sort of like this part of becomes a process of performance reviews.
Yeah. And you want us to also think about cost of living adjustments. So with inflation, like if you are not getting, I mean, I think right now in the US, it's like around 7%. So if you aren't getting a 7% increase this year, then you're actually losing purchasing power with your salary. So that's something to keep in mind too, is that you're actually making less money each year if you don't ask for a raise, or if there's not a culture of automatic raises.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, so to keep that in mind, if you feel like, oh, it's too early, or I don't know, like you are literally losing money if you don't ask for a raise each year with the way that inflation is. So,
Yes.
and then again, anytime that your job materially changes as far as the responsibilities, the benefits, anything that you're working on, that's also an opportunity too. So.
Some startups I know also like trade for like maybe a little less salary. So I don't know margin, but also might give you like a bigger title. There is no harm in this, but except you're beginner or in mid-level, do not opt for this because you do need a lot of mentorship. You do need to learn how to do the job itself, how to get mentorship, how to grow in your career. So yeah, it's like fancy titles. It's not about fancy. Titles are good, and especially for underrepresented, titles are important. But sort of like if this is in the way of negotiation, so be very careful. At least like maybe talk to someone, and then yeah, or might be worth like to know what you're negotiating. I think this should be like very important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It can be very enticing to say, oh, I'll get to be a VP if I go to this startup, and then do it for a few years, and then like the next job, then I'll be at that level. But I've heard a lot of stories from people who did that, and they did not have what they needed to be successful. They didn't have the support. They didn't have, their job responsibilities were very vague, and so you end up, hurting your career because you don't actually have that path of success. So that's a really, really great point.
So after a verbal offer, how does a phone call where a recruiter discusses comp numbers work? Am I expected to ask for more on the phone, or can they tell me numbers? I take a day to evaluate and then I ask for an adjustment through email. Yeah, very good question. So I think recruiters might push you saying, oh, like, we have to, we really want you to answer now. But usually recruiters also give, I guess, 2 to 3 days of time. Again, this really depends on how critical the role is, etc. You are always entitled to tell you. So one thing that I learned when I was going through various resources is just to tell interesting. So not like, if at all the, let's say the offer is really good, you're very excited, control all your emotions. Just don't jump and tell, oh, you know what, thank you so much. Do not tell. Be very prepared, be very calm, and just tell interesting, because interesting is like sort of a neutral word, and it doesn't give the recruiter either a yes or a no. So just be calm and tell, I actually had to practice this, and tell, okay, interesting. You really have to practice this to get this right. And then just tell them politely that, thank you for the offer, I really appreciate the call. I need time to maybe check with my family, to just consult maybe whoever you have to consult, tell them. And just tell them, maybe, is it okay if I get back to you maybe by the end of the week? And if the recruiter says no, we have to like, maybe, can you call us by Wednesday? Just tell them, okay, I'll try to do that. So this is very important, because even if the offer is on the higher side, just do not tell, oh, you know what, thank you so much. Just like contain all your emotions and just tell interesting. So place the call, take a deep breath, and then re-evaluate all the offers that you have on plate. And then whenever you're ready, go for the next call. So always, like, it doesn't ever hurt, or you won't lose an offer just if at all you negotiate or ask for more from what is currently offered. It's just that they might just say yes or a no. And then and once everything is settled, ask them to give this in writing. So this is like an ideal workflow.
Yeah, and
Yes.
you can choose how you prefer. I know that for me, like doing this on the phone is difficult. It can be very stressful. So if you prefer to have some time and be able to submit it through writing, where it's like a little bit less stressful because you can think it all out and you can type it all out, I would say that recruiters are incentivized to close as soon as possible. So if you do have a number in mind, or if they give you a number and you have a percentage in mind, then, and you're comfortable, say, and you can practice it, they give a number, be like, okay, I appreciate that. I think with given, and have like 3 bullet points ready, like given the scope of the responsibilities I'm gonna be taking on, the experience that I bring to the position, and the market value and the current market rate, I was expecting something along the lines of this. Can we get to this? Or do you need more time to think about it? And kind of like put it back on them as a question. And typically a recruiter will have some kind of range, or they'll say, I'll have to go get approval. So if you feel comfortable and you're able to kind of have a number in mind going in of where you want to be, or some people will also say, just ask for like an extra 10 to 15% of whatever they tell you, and see if you can get it. I don't know about that. I think that you can probably be a little bit more strategic, but yeah, so if you are able to practice and do it on the phone, then recruiters are incentivized to try and close, and you may be able to do that. And then you'll also be able to kind of get a sense too of how like much they need you, like how much they want to hire you, because if they are able to come back right away, then you can see, okay, I have some leverage here, like it's, and kind of work with that. So, but yeah, you can absolutely take time. I've been on the hiring side, and we've had people who evaluated, sometimes, you're waiting for another company and you want to be able to compare offers. All of that is very valid. So yeah.
Right. So in the end, it's all about, remember that you're advocating for yourself, and it's also about, yeah, like Cecilia said, it's also about strategizing. So if you're like really like the job, and if it's like, yeah, something really good that you want, then it's also worth to know, like, what's worth negotiating at this point. You may not want to lose the offer, but again, like, just negotiating won't make you lose the offer. So it's all about, I think, being strategic here, and then, yeah, just asking, like, just doing that, asking for it.
And again, you write it down, like before you get on the phone with the recorder or with the recruiter, like have it a paper in front of you with like the high number that you want, the lowest you're willing to take, 3 bullet points of what value you bring to the job. And that way, like when you're on the phone, like it's terrifying. Like I don't know about how other people feel, but for me, like my heart is racing. And so having it in front of me written down can really help give me like an anchor point to refer to when I'm talking on the phone. So, and I love that interesting, like anything, like have something ready to just take a breath. You don't have to respond right away. You can let it breathe.
So yeah, Cecilia, you want to take that question from me?
Yeah. So I was negotiating and they came back with, but we have other candidates. How do you respond to that? As like, I respect that, and I understand that you also have other candidates. I do have to do my due diligence and evaluate this position against other opportunities that are available to me. And so I do need a few days to review. If you could give me a time frame by which you absolutely have to have an answer, I can let you know if that works with my timeline. So they have other candidates, like unless they're giving out multiple offers at once, which they probably shouldn't be, and hopefully they're not, because that'd be really bad. Really what they're saying is like, give us a yes or no so we can go to the next person on our list, right? And you are entitled to a few days, right? I mean, they don't need to let the other person know, like how many times, like when you do an interview, you probably have like about a week or a week and a half, 2 weeks before you maybe get an offer. And it may be because you weren't the first person, but the other person like didn't take it. So regardless of that, like I respect that. I understand that this is a big decision for me. I have to evaluate this opportunity against other opportunities that are available to me, and I do need a few days. I mean, if they don't understand that, then you don't want to work for them anyway. So yeah. I say that a lot. You don't want to work with them anyway.
+1. And like said earlier, if it's possible, and if you're like already interviewing for multiple companies, so try to schedule the rounds at the same time. This can get a bit hectic. So it's, yeah, again, like managing your time here. But what will really help you towards the end is it will like really give you like an upper edge in terms of deciding and also like comparing offers, because all the offers will also like come at the same time, and then you can like really think through it and then just pick the one that you kind of like really want. So again, may not work well all the time because interviews themselves are very stressful. But if possible, try to schedule almost all the companies around the same time. And then when you get the offer, you kind of like, yeah, have a lot of options to evaluate against.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank
Those
you,
were all
Elsie.
great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and so I guess if I were to add anything else around this, is be prepared, know your worth, and practice, right? You don't want to go in unprepared. You don't want to go in thinking that you are going to be lucky with whatever they give you, because this is your career. It's how you're going to spend a big chunk of your time, and you want to be well compensated for that. And also know that they wouldn't be at the point of negotiating a salary with you if they did not want to hire you, right? So you got to this point for a reason. Now just ensure that you're going to get the value that you deserve for the work that you're going to be doing. So, yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Should you ask how the company arrived at their salary number? I don't. That's interesting. Oh, I don't think I've ever had anybody ask that. I would be, if it comes in, if it's low, like, right, so that's probably what it is. Like, if it comes in lower than you expect, I would say something along the lines of, well, based on current market value for this type of role, I usually see things in the range of, like 130 to 160. Are there other benefits that come along with this position that make up that difference? Or I would kind of maybe ask it that way, but I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. Do you have any insight on that?
Yes, it's a good question. Again, I have not asked anybody ask me directly about this, except employees within the company. We kind of like constantly ask. I think, yeah, there is no harm in asking because, either the recruiter will tell, oh, sorry, like, we cannot disclose. Yeah, so it's all about just asking the question, and yeah, they might either give you an answer or they might just tell, we use like data from the things which do match the market kind of value. So they might give a diplomatic answer.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious how somebody would answer that, because I feel like a lot of times it's just like, I don't know, that's the budget or whatever, kind of a thing. But yeah, I would say if it comes in, it probably, because you're asking that question because it's lower than you expect. Really what you're trying to get at is like, what are you going to, like, what is it, what makes up the difference, right? Like, why is it low? So, but yeah, that's interesting. That's a really good question.
Yeah.
All right.
Any
Well,
more
if
questions?
any of you are currently negotiating or in the hiring or in the candidate process, good luck. If
Then, yeah. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Cecilia. And yeah, thanks everyone for asking great questions. Best of luck.
great
Bye.
to see everyone.